When the average person pictures an animated film, more specifically a Disney animated feature, their mind probably shifts towards one of their classic fairy tale films. Whether it's the studio's maiden voyage with Snow White, their 250s princess movies in Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty, or more recent additions to the canon like The Princess and the Frog or Tangled, it's clear that the mouse has a penchant for adapting these classic tales to the big screen. But one thing that these 5 films and even a few of their shorts have in common is that they can all be traced back to the Brothers Grimm. Scholars Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm centered their curiosities around German literature and folklore during the early 1800s, collecting as many spoken and written tales as they could find. Over time, they'd gather hundreds of these stories before editing and compiling them into several volumes, referred to today as Grimm's Fairy Tales, thus popularizing many of the world's foremost stories in this style and eventually leading to a slew of animated adaptations from all across the world. But, although Disney might be the most famous outlet for animating Grimm's fairy tales into features, they weren't the first, as Snow White was beaten to the punch 19 days earlier by our series' next film, 1937's The Seven Ravens. The first animated feature based on one of the Brothers Grimm's fairy tales, The Seven Ravens is, funnily enough, brought to us courtesy of another pair of brothers. Enter Ferdinand and Hermann Diehl, German stop-motion animators most famous in their home country for their film starring Meki, a hedgehog who from what I can tell was popular enough to have his own line of German toys and books similar to Mickey Mouse here in the States. They'd end up making a bevy of stop-motion shorts, many of which, including Meki's films, were based on one of the Grimm's fairy tales. And although they'd go on to make a few movies using live-action puppetry, The Seven Ravens stands as their lone feature-length animated film. Our story follows a young girl who's struck by the gossiping words of some nearby townswomen. They insinuate that she's responsible for her brother's misfortune, but to her knowledge, she'd been an only child her entire life. The girl asks her mother about these comments, and she reluctantly tells the girl the truth. When the girl was a newborn, she fell gravely ill, and the family rushed to baptize her lest her soul be lost. Her father sent the oldest son out to the well to fetch some ceremonial water. The 6 other brothers all rushed along to get there first and, in their haste, knocked the pitcher down to the bottom of the well. Time passed and the father walked out of the house in anger, assuming that his sons went off playing instead of helping their ailing sister, so he cursed them by wishing they'd be turned into ravens. And in a cruel twist of fate, they did. After hearing the story, the girl blames herself for the incident and ends up sneaking off in the middle of the night to find her brothers. She eventually meets a good fairy who says that if she takes a vow of silence for 7 years and knits 7 shirts out of her golden hair, then her brothers will be saved and returned to their human forms. The girl agrees and begins silently sewing away in the forest, hoping to one day reunite with her long-lost brothers. Now, as our 3rd consecutive film in the series to utilize puppet-based stop-motion animation, it's not hard to draw comparisons between The Seven Ravens and its predecessors, which doesn't do it any favors. Characters' movements are stiff and rigid, with many of the shots consisting of characters just sitting still while their lips flap and their arms occasionally jut forward. The facial expressions are even more limited, as the figures lack the ability to move their brows or change their eye and mouth shapes to convey thought and emotion, resulting in a slew of 1,000-yard stares all throughout the picture. And what's more, the look and feel of these characters is incredibly monotonous. You wouldn't be able to identify most of these characters from their silhouettes, nor highlight any idiosyncratic gestures or speeds of movements from them like you would the King in The New Gulliver or the Badger in The Tale of the Fox, which makes it an uphill battle for these guys to endear themselves to an audience. In these aspects, the look of The Seven Ravens can be a bit rough, but the film isn't without its merits. Though the doll-like construction of these puppets may hamper their acting range, it does make for some strong visual synergy with our story. The film opens up with the Jester, our makeshift narrator of sorts, being pulled out of a doll box and put together by co-director Ferdinand and Diehl, lending the story to feeling like it's being portrayed by sentient dolls. Plus, there are some genuinely impressive pieces of technical animation here and there, most notably for me being the 2 scenes where the Jester plays his lute, which have such believable picking and finger placement on the neck, especially when compared to the cat's wild plucking in The Tale of the Fox, that it must have been based on some sort of reference footage or performance. But if there's anything that The Seven Ravens contributes to the history of animated feature filmmaking, it is undoubtedly the film's use of cinematography. While The New Gulliver and The Tale of the Fox may have had some impressive set pieces with the camera swooping around vast environments or following our heroes as they hurtled away at high speeds, once characters slowed down to talk or found themselves in smaller, less imposing environments, the camera would suddenly have its wings clipped and remain locked to a single position. Not so in The Seven Ravens. While there may be the odd static two-shot or shot-reverse shot during conversations, the film also manages to incorporate plenty of movement too. Our first establishing shot of the movie slowly zooms in on our heroine drawing water from a well, as we're literally and figuratively drawn into the story. We slowly pan around the corner as the girl sheepishly asks her mother about the townswomen's chatter, with the camera echoing her hesitation. The camera slowly flies out the window as the girl wonders where her brothers could be, and even when the movement isn't serving some greater purpose, it's still adding some much needed cinematic flourishes to otherwise unremarkable scenes. You really don't notice how much you're missing a simple whip pan or slow zoom out during dialogue until it's either gone or suddenly reintroduced. And after back-to-back films without them, it goes a long way here. But with all that being said, there's only so much you can do to elevate such a lackluster set of plot and characters. The core issue for me is in how passive the narrative is, both in terms of the actual events and in how the film presents them. The inciting incident of the father cursing his sons into ravens is a good example, as he proclaims his wish while the sons are off-screen and their horrible transformations occur, once again, off-screen. The resolution is also incredibly passive, as even after our heroine finishes sewing the 7 shirts out of her hair, she still needs to wait until 7 whole years have passed since she was first given the mission by the good fairy. In both cases, we see characters make decisions that have direct consequences, but the plot hinges on things happening to or around them rather than thrusting them into more active roles. Plus, it's not as if there's anything in the way of characterization to add some spice to these bland proceedings. There are no distinct personalities on display, nor engaging character dynamics, and for as much crap as the prince in Snow White seems to get for his romance with the titular princess, he's got nothing on the prince in this movie, who literally stumbles upon the girl in the forest and proposes to her on the spot. And to top it off, the pacing in this film is all sorts of wrong. Sequences that should stay short and sweet are stretched out far beyond reason, such as when we watch our heroine sew the 7 shirts. For a scene that's begging for an efficient montage where she struggles to get her bearings in the woods, show kindness to the animals, and they in turn help her with the task, we instead get a nearly 6-minute long scene that constantly cuts away from our protagonist in favor of drawn-out shots of wildlife. And the reverse is also true, such as with the momentary anti-climax that this film calls an ending. If the movie did a better job of infusing some more life into these characters and paced itself more strategically, then I could see the movie landing better for me even with its bare bones plot. Something that a certain film up next in our series would manage to do, but I'll save my thoughts on that for later. Because of that, we've reached the end of our review for The Seven Ravens, a film that, although I may be a bit lukewarm on overall, I can't overlook the contributions that it made to animated filmmaking with its shot composition and use of camera movement, elements that even future stop-motion animated features would struggle to implement to its level. So for that, it definitely deserves some flowers. Moving on to my rankings, The Seven Ravens is the second of the 3 1937 animated films that we've covered, and for now, it'll be receiving the silver medal for this year's crop of films. Only time will tell if it'll keep its place on the podium. As for our multi-decade rankings, The Seven Ravens slots itself comfortably at the bottom of the list for now. But, trust me, it won't be down there forever if you catch my drift.
This is awful in every way.
Starting with the next video, we'll start looking at films that I'm sure most of you are familiar with as we begin our dive into Disney's catalog of animated features, so stay tuned for that in the coming weeks. But until then, thanks for watching.